Imagine you're diving through the crystal-clear waters off the coast of Japan. The deeper you descend, the quieter the world becomes. Sunlight begins to fade, colors disappear. All you can hear is your own breathing. Then, out of the darkness, enormous stone walls emerge, perfectly straight edges, massive terraces, sharp 90-degree corners. It doesn't look like nature. It looks like architecture. For nearly 40 years, this underwater formation has divided scientists, archaeologists, and explorers around the world. Some believe it's nothing more than an extraordinary geological accident. Others believe it could rewrite everything we know about the origins of civilization. Because if these stones were truly shaped by human hands, they were built thousands of years before the pyramids. And that would change history forever. This is the mystery of the Yonaguni Monument. The story begins in the winter of 1986. Japanese diving instructor Kihachiro Aratake wasn't searching for lost civilizations. He wasn't looking for ancient ruins. He was simply trying to find a better location where divers could observe schools of hammerhead sharks near Yonaguni Island, the westernmost inhabited island of Japan. Instead, he found something nobody expected. About 25 meters beneath the surface, Aratake came across an enormous stone formation, unlike anything he had ever seen. At first, it almost didn't seem real. The structure rose from the seabed like the remains of a forgotten fortress. Gigantic terraces climbed one above another. Broad platforms stretched into the distance. Massive walls met at remarkably sharp angles. Long, perfectly straight edges extended for dozens of meters. The entire formation looked less like a cliff and more like the ruins of a city swallowed by the sea. Word spread quickly through Japan's diving community. Within months, researchers, photographers, journalists, and curious explorers began traveling to Yonaguni to see the mysterious site with their own eyes. The more photographs emerged, the stranger the monument appeared. Viewed from certain angles, it resembled an enormous stepped pyramid. From others, it looked like a temple carved directly into solid rock. Some divers even claimed they could recognize staircases, roads, gateways, and massive platforms that seemed almost impossible to explain as random geology. Before long, newspapers began calling it something irresistible: Japan's Atlantis. The nickname captured the world's imagination almost instantly. After all, human history is filled with stories of lost civilizations swallowed by the sea. From Plato's legend of Atlantis to submerged settlements discovered beneath coastlines around the world, the idea that entire chapters of history may still lie hidden beneath the oceans has fascinated people for centuries. Could Yonaguni be another one of those forgotten places? Or were people simply seeing patterns where none actually existed? That single question transformed an underwater curiosity into one of archaeology's most controversial mysteries. Today, the formation known as the Yonaguni Monument stretches roughly 150 meters in length and rises nearly 27 meters from the ocean floor. Its most recognizable feature is an immense series of flat terraces stacked one above another, resembling the steps of a colossal pyramid. Near the center lies a broad platform, often referred to by divers as the stage. Its edges appear remarkably clean. Its corners approach perfect right angles. Nearby stand two massive vertical rock formations that many visitors describe as twin pillars. Elsewhere, another section resembles the remains of a collapsed gateway. Perhaps the most controversial feature of all is what some researchers believe resembles a carved human face emerging from the stone itself. Individually, each feature might be dismissed as coincidence, but together, they create an image that is surprisingly difficult to ignore. The deeper scientists looked, the more divided they became, because what seemed obvious to one expert looked completely impossible to another. And that disagreement would soon evolve into one of the most fascinating scientific debates of the modern era. As images of the Yonaguni Monument spread around the world, something unexpected happened. The debate stopped being local and started becoming global. Because the more people studied the structure, the more divided they became. On one side, there were researchers who believed they were looking at nothing more than natural geology, an unusual but entirely explainable formation shaped by time, pressure, and erosion. On the other side were those who saw something far more controversial, something artificial, something built. One of the strongest voices supporting the idea of human involvement is Masaki Kimura, a marine geologist from the University of the Ryukyus. Kimura has spent decades diving the waters of Yonaguni, documenting every angle, every surface, every unusual feature he can find. And to him, the monument is not random. It is structured. He points to what he describes as possible human-made elements: flat platforms that resemble plazas, sharp edges that appear unusually clean, and step-like formations that look too organized to be coincidence. In some areas, Kimura believes he has identified features that resemble drainage channels, cut into the rock as if to manage water flow. In others, he suggests the existence of what could be a quarry, where large stone blocks may have been separated from the main structure. He even argues that certain markings could be traces of ancient tools, though heavily eroded by time and the ocean. From his perspective, Yonaguni may not be a natural formation at all, but a modified monument, possibly even a stepped pyramid built for ritual or ceremonial purposes by a prehistoric culture lost to history. And if that interpretation is correct, the implications are staggering. Because of one simple problem: time. To have built something like this above water, sea levels would have needed to be significantly lower than they are today. And that takes us back to the last ice age. Roughly 10,000 to 12,000 years ago, Earth was a very different place. Massive glaciers locked up enormous amounts of water. Coastlines were exposed. Land bridges connected regions that are now separated by ocean. If Yonaguni was once above sea level during that period, then any human structure found there would be incredibly ancient, older than the pyramids of Egypt, older than Stonehenge, older than most accepted timelines of advanced civilization. And that is where the controversy becomes explosive, because it challenges a fundamental assumption in archaeology, that complex architecture only appears relatively late in human history. But not everyone agrees with Kimura. In fact, many geologists strongly reject the idea that Yonaguni is man-made. Among the most well-known critics is Robert Schoch, a geologist from Boston University. Schoch has personally visited and studied the site, and his conclusion is very different. He argues that everything seen at Yonaguni can be explained through natural geological processes. The region is made primarily of sedimentary sandstone, a type of rock that naturally fractures along straight lines and weak planes. Over time, earthquakes, tectonic pressure, and erosion can produce extremely geometric shapes: flat surfaces, sharp edges, even step-like formations. In other words, what looks artificial may simply be nature revealing its structure. Schoch also warns about a powerful psychological effect: the human brain's tendency to recognize patterns even when none exist. Faces in clouds, shapes in mountains, structures in random noise. A phenomenon known as pattern recognition bias. From this perspective, Yonaguni is not evidence of a lost civilization, but an illusion created by both geology and perception. So where does that leave us? Interestingly, most mainstream geologists side with the natural formation explanation, not because the site is simple, but because no definitive evidence of human construction has ever been found. No tools, no inscriptions, no artifacts, nothing that clearly proves a human origin. And yet, the debate refuses to die, because even skeptics admit something important: Yonaguni is unusual. The symmetry in certain areas, the precision of some angles, the scale of the formations. They continue to raise questions that geology alone doesn't completely settle for everyone. And that is why Yonaguni remains suspended between two worlds, one grounded in science, the other in possibility. And somewhere in between,
a mystery that refuses to disappear. Because whether it is nature or human hands, one truth remains. We still don't fully understand what we are looking at.
If Yonaguni is just a natural rock formation, then the story ends here. But if there is even a small chance it is something more, then the implications go far beyond a single underwater structure. They reach into the deepest gaps of human history. To understand why this debate matters so much, we have to zoom out, way out, back to the last ice age. Around 10,000 to 12,000 years ago, Earth was undergoing one of the most dramatic transformations in its history. Massive ice sheets that once covered large parts of the planet began to melt, and as they melted, sea levels rose. Not slightly, but dramatically. Entire coastlines disappeared. Low-lying land bridges vanished beneath the ocean, and vast regions that humans once walked across were swallowed by water. This is not speculation. We know for a fact that early humans were present in East Asia tens of thousands of years ago. Archaeological evidence shows that people reached Japan long before recorded history, likely using land bridges that are now submerged. Which raises a powerful question. How much of early human history is now underwater, completely out of reach? Across the world, underwater archaeology has revealed hints of lost landscapes, submerged structures, sunken coastlines, ancient sites now sitting far below modern sea levels. But most of these discoveries are fragmented, incomplete, hard to interpret, and Yonaguni sits directly inside this larger global mystery. A mystery that is not about one island, but about how much of humanity's past may still be hidden beneath the ocean. This is where imagination and science begin to collide again. If Yonaguni were a natural formation, it would simply be another example of how powerful geology can be, a reminder that nature can create structures that look intentional, even when they are not. But if it were ever proven to be artificial, then it would force a complete rewriting of the timeline of civilization. It would suggest that advanced human societies existed far earlier than we currently believe, and that much of their evidence has been erased by rising seas. But here is the core problem. Despite decades of exploration, despite thousands of dives, despite advanced imaging and sonar technology, no definitive proof of human construction has ever been found at Yonaguni. No tools, no inscriptions, no cultural artifacts, nothing that clearly connects the structure to a civilization. And in science, absence of evidence matters. Still, Yonaguni refuses to become a simple answer. Because even without proof of human origin, the site continues to challenge perception. Its symmetry in certain areas, its massive scale, the way light and shadow interact with its edges underwater, all of it creates an illusion that feels intentional, even if it is not. And that is why this debate continues, not because science has failed, but because nature is far more complex than we often expect, and because our understanding of the deep past is still incomplete. We know more about the surface of Mars than we do about the ancient coastlines now buried beneath our oceans. So maybe Yonaguni is not asking us to choose between two answers. Maybe it is asking us to accept uncertainty itself, to recognize that some questions cannot yet be fully resolved, at least not with the evidence we currently have. Because whether it is a masterpiece of geology or a lost fragment of human history, Yonaguni sits at the same point in both stories, the boundary between what we know and what we are still trying to understand. So the question remains, when you look at those underwater terraces, those sharp edges, those impossible-looking shapes, what are you really seeing? A coincidence of nature? Or the shadow of something humanity has forgotten? And maybe the real mystery is not what lies under the water, but how much of our own history is still waiting to be rediscovered.